Okay, so it's 11:02. We can start. Firstly, hello, good morning, everyone. I'm hoping everybody's have a good weekend, but amidst this 1 hour of class is not much, right? So, anyways, good morning, good morning. A couple of you are already here. Amita, Tanishk, Shrestha. Good morning, hello. Um, I'll do the introduction part. In the meanwhile, I'm hoping other people will also join. Cool. So, my name is Nikitha, and I'm the history educator here at Unacademy Scholars channel. And I take classes for both standard 11th and 12th, right? A little bit about the Telegram Scholars channel per se. The link for that is in the description below of this video. I highly urge you all to go join it, because if there are any updates regarding anything that's going to happen on the YouTube channel, you'll be given information on the Telegram channel per se. So that will be very helpful in terms of updates. So highly recommend to go join it. The link is in the description below for that. Go check that out. And there's a special test called Emerge, which is happening on behalf of Unacademy. Like, Unacademy is conducting it. So these are basically free live mock tests, and these are aligned with the latest CBSE guidelines. So if you take part in these tests, it will basically act like a revision for your term 1 boards, right? And it's happening now, it's live now. It started on 16th, 17th, 18th and goes on till 19th, right? Again, the link for that is in the description below. Go enroll yourselves and take part in the test. A couple of minutes spending on Unacademy's Plus features. So you can actually sit at your own houses and listen to some of the top classes taught by Plus educators of India, and all of these are available on one single platform, right? There's unlimited access to all the courses, and there are regular doubt clearing sessions, there are answer writing sessions. Along with that, there is also a provision for practice tests and live test series. There's exhaustive coverage of syllabus. There's mentorship given to you. There's guidance given to you. Along with that, there is also access to study materials in the form of PDF, which are very highly helpful, especially during the revision times. So I highly urge you all to go subscribe it, and there are different ranges of subscription for it. Yeah, to be very specific, there are 6 types. The first is a 3-month duration subscription. Then comes a 9-month, 12-month, 15, 18 and 24 months respectively. The prices are clearly listed just beside the durations. Have a look at them and go ahead with whichever one you feel comfortable or want to. Moving on to Iconic, here the features are even better and greater than Plus, in the sense that there's personal mentorship provided, like a one-on-one thing with your mentor. Then there are live doubt solving sessions, there are weekly reports. Alongside that, there's also a direct parent connect between your parent and mentor. And lastly, there are study planners provided, which again are highly helpful. And when it comes to pricing for Iconic, the durations are the same, just like Plus, the same 6 ranges. But pricing might hike a little bit here because of the extra features. So again, they are clearly up on the screen. Have a look at them and feel free to subscribe to whichever one you want to, right? Anyways, before going on to the actual content for today, let me just say that there is some kind of special content which you can actually unlock by following the below mentioned steps. Namely, first you have to download the Unacademy Learning app on your Google Play Store. Yeah, on your mobile phone by using the Google Play Store, and then log into the app with proper credentials, and then select your goal, right, which is 12th standard. And select the menu button on the top left corner, and there's an option called Special. Click on that. It'll ask you for an invite code. You can use this one, which is TUM10, and basically you will be able to unlock the special content, right? That's how you access it. Anyways, so that's a little bit of the pitch we had for today. We'll quickly move into the class, but in the meanwhile, a couple of you are here. Again, I don't know who this is, but it's foot on double slit. Whoever that is, good morning. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. I'm hoping y'all are doing great too. Tanishk, to answer your question, not really. My sessions are going to be entirely in English, right? I don't know to speak Hindi, Tanishk, so they're going to be entirely in English. Amita is here. I'm good, Amita. Thanks for asking. What code are you asking, Tanishk? We don't have a mentee quiz today. We're just going to deal with the 7th chapter, which is Vijayanagara. I think you must have mistaken it for the mentee quiz. We're not having any sort of quiz, Tanishk. Anyways, so we'll quickly move ahead. So we've already started this session. We've had like a couple of sessions on Vijayanagara, the imperial capital, in the last 3 classes, I'm supposing. So we'll continue with that today, right? So basically the centuries we're going to deal with is 14th to 16th century, because that is like the peak time of Vijayanagara rule. Yeah. So anyways, so in the last class I've shown you a picture that the whole of the Vijayanagara empire had a particular a particular let's say the southern part is the royal center, right? On the other side there are a lot of temples. On one side only elite people used to live, like the category, like the classification of the land, right? So today, in today's class, we'll be talking about one such classification, right, which is named as the royal center. Royal center, as the name suggests, is obviously the place where all these palaces are located, or where the royal families are living and all, right? That's very simple, deciphered from the name itself. So we'll look into the details of it, right? Was it only the palaces which used to be there, or was it something else which was also there as a part of the royal center? And what are the functions of those buildings, right? We'll talk about all of that in today's class. Anyways, so in the whole of the territory, let's roughly imagine that the territory of Vijayanagara city is somewhat of a square shape. Yeah, because that's what we've seen in the last class. So the royal center is actually located in the southwestern part of the settlement. Yeah, like southwest. I'll just draw a rough figure. Let's say this is the settlement, right? Like a rough estimate towards the southwestern part, right? So roughly this area is the place where the royal center was located as a part of the Vijayanagara city, right? So that's the geographical location. So one thing which we need to remember is it's officially called royal center, right? Indicating that only kings used to live here and nobody else. But one important point we need to remember here is it included over 60 temples, right? We have a separate religious center. Yeah, we'll talk about it in later classes, but we have a separate religious center within the city. But within the royal center itself also we have 60 temples, right? So what do we see here? Like literally you go out onto the street, you have 2-3 temples at every corner of the street. There are n number of temples, n number of religious shrines, right? That basically tells us that people of Vijayanagara empire and Vijayanagara city in particular are very, very religious, right? They're very spiritual. They always associate themselves with some kind of cult or tradition, right? Be it Shaivism, Vaishnavism, any other like Puranic religions, right? And all those other different forms of Hinduism we have. Sometimes even Muslims were residing in Vijayanagara, right? Because of the Deccani Sultanates. So whatever the situation is, the religious centers were very high in number within the Vijayanagara city, and also 60 of them were located in the royal center, right? But why are they building all of these temples in the royal center, right? kings have dedicated a separate place to temples, then why are they building temples in near their palaces as well? That is a question definitely worth asking, right? So in order to answer that question, one could fairly say that they are patronaging the temples, right? They are the patrons. And why are they doing it? Because if they kind of believe in God, if they kind of construct all these temples, give donations and funds to all the religious places, then people will be easily convinced by the king's rule. People will accept the rulers, right? That is how they legitimize their authority. They are associating themselves often with the divine creature or like the god. Yeah, so that's again a dynamic relationship between the ordinary people, like the subjects of the kingdom, the king himself, and the religious institutions, right? They always work hand in hand. If king is able to show to the people that I am also a religious person and therefore I am funding for the construction of temples, then people will accept the king as their ruler. Yeah, that's like a basic logical point here. So that is why they are patronizing so many temples and constructing them within their palaces or just outside their palaces, right? Cool. So out of in the royal center itself, how many ever buildings are there? About 30 of them, like 30 building complexes, like 30, right? 30 of them have been identified as palaces. That is a lot, right? Because literally one royal family will be there, or like maximum two, that too like their brothers or nephews or relatives. So for them to reside in, there being 30 palaces is too much, right? But nonetheless 30 were there. Basically they were like all these symbolic importances, right? If I have like a huge palace, then that's like a show off to the world. That is exactly what every king did, right? He used to decorate all his palaces, so much luxury, so much wealth, so much grandeur, right? It's all to show to the outside world that he is mighty and powerful. That is why he constructed, Vijayanagara rulers constructed 30 palaces within the royal center. Okay. Darshita is here with us. Hi, Darshita. Tanishk, regarding your question regarding the quiz. So, tomorrow is the last day we'll be discussing this chapter, which is Monday, right? And as soon as that is over, on Wednesday we'll be having a quiz. All right. Maximum by Wednesday, and if portion is not yet completed by Wednesday as well, then I promise you all Friday for sure, right? In the next week definitely we'll be having a quiz on this particular chapter. Yeah. I'm hoping that answers your question, Tanishk. Devika, I was just saying that, right? It either takes one or maximum two more sessions, then we can quickly have a quiz, Devika. Okay, cool, you got it. Uday, again, I have repeatedly mentioned this point that sessions are going to be only in English because I don't know how to speak Hindi, right? So, okay, Jagrati is here. Hello, Jagrati, good morning. Devika has a request. Maps and picture based session. Yes, Devika, I'm planning for that also. I think in yesterday's class also I've mentioned that we'll be having a map session right after the quiz for this chapter. So that is set. Don't worry about that. Cool. Chalo, we'll quickly move ahead then. But in case anybody has any questions, just keep putting down in the chat box, right? Anyway, so we've discussed the 30 building complexes, right, which are identified as palaces. So these are relatively large structures. Like I'm talking about the palaces, right? Obviously palaces are supposed to be large, they are usually large. So in the same manner, in the Vijayanagara city as well, all these 30 palaces are huge structures, right? Like massive structures. And the fact that, okay, like if you look at the structure, you might be confused because temples are also larger, right? Temples are also so big in those days. So when archaeologists are actually carrying out the archaeological work in the city of Vijayanagara, yeah, they might get confused between what exactly this building stands for, right? The fact that it's in the royal center, is it a palace, or because they are able to find so many temples, is it a temple, right? So that question obviously arises, right? Like whether it's a palace or a temple. And the way that they concluded by saying that these are palaces only is by looking at some kind of ritual associated functions, right? They've looked all over the place, they did not find anything related to rituals, right? Be it the statues of gods or be it all those fire altars, right? Fire altars are those square boxes where they, like, the fire comes out and people usually roam around that fire, right? So those are fire altars, right? So any such religious associated things, ritual associated things, nothing were found in those 30 complexes, right? And that is how they came to a conclusion that if these are not religious temples, then definitely they have to be palaces, right? So they came via the elimination method. Cool. And again, what is that one difference between temples and palaces? Um, there is one major difference, right? In the way that they are actually constructed. Yeah. So the latter were constructed entirely of masonry, right? So all these palaces, they are all these palaces, they were constructed entirely of masonry. Like masonry is nothing but like proper brickwork using cement and mortar, right? All the bricks are aligned together, just like how we construct our houses today using all the cement and mortar. That is exactly how the palaces were constructed, right? So, but again, if you come to the temples, yeah, they are constructed usually of the perishable materials, like they'll be easily like destroyed or ruined, right? So that's the difference between temples and palaces. Okay, so we'll quickly move on to the next subtopic, which is titled as the Mahanavami Dibba, which is also a part of the city, right? Vijayanagara city, and also a part of the royal center itself, right? So what is this Mahanavi Dibba? How did it get its name? You know, like where is it located? How is the structure? We'll be talking about all of those details in this and next slide, right? So some of the most distinctive features in the area have been assigned names based on the form of buildings as well as their functions, right? So if you're particularly looking at the royal center, whatever like special buildings are there, like not just temples and palaces, but there are also other structures, right? So we don't know what they were called when it was actually present, like in the 14th 15th centuries, we don't know what those structures are called. But once in the 19th 20th century, when historians and archaeologists have been carrying out work, like they've been excavating all these sites, then they came across all these huge structures, right? And then they gave some kind of particular names to them depending on what they looked like, right? Depending on how they looked, what their form is, and also sometimes depending on their functions, what is the use, right? In the same manner, Mahanavami Dibba also got its name like that. Yeah. Dibba, again in Kannada/Telugu terms, it means a huge mound, right? So because the structure is like a huge mound, it got its name as Dibba, right? So we look at how Mahanavami came in the next slide, right? So the king's palace is the largest of the enclosures, definitely, right? Like obviously wherever the king is playing, king is residing, that place will obviously be the largest. Yeah, too decorative, so much grandeur and luxury. Yeah. That is the palace, like where he used to visit all his courtiers, like carry out all these administrative functions and all. But on the other side, there is no evidence that whether he actually lived there or not. Right? So what does this mean? They're trying to indicate that the palace and royal residence, like the house, probably they were different. Yeah, because King's Palace is in a totally different place in the royal center, and the royal residence is in a different place, right? Probably you have to walk a couple of miles or something like that. Yeah, so that those are two different places according to what the historians claim, right? And it has the two most impressive platforms, right? The King's Palace, surrounding the King's Palace, there are two impressive platforms, like two impressive structures, right? The first is the audience hall. As the name suggests, again, a hall where audience assemble, right? That's fairly simple to say. And the second is Mahanavami Dibba, right? The main focus of the sub-theme we'll be talking about in detail in the next slide, right? So the entire complex again is surrounded by high double walls. Yeah, again, what are we seeing here? We are seeing fortifications, right? There's a big huge wall, in fact double wall, running around the entire complex of the King's Palace, right? And it's well connected to all the streets. So why are fortifications important again? I was telling you about the sieges in the last class, right? So whenever there are any sieges, so king could escape from these streets which are attached to the palaces. Like if he doesn't have enough military or if he doesn't have power to retaliate, then he could escape from the back door which are connected to the main streets, right? The enemies won't be there, so he could easily escape, right? So that's why again the importance of the connection of the streets and the fortifications, right? So, and lastly, coming to the audience hall, the first impressive feature here. It's a high platform with slots for wooden pillars at close and regular intervals. Again, there are pillars in this hall, but they are too close, right? It often feels like the place is suffocated, very congested, right? Because of n number of pillars that are there in the audience hall. Yeah. So, and also it's a two-story building. Like the audience hall is not just one floor, but it is a two-story building, and obviously there's a staircase to go upstairs, and this staircase rested on these n number of pillars, right? And because of the fact that the pillars are so closely spaced, one should obviously get a doubt that how is it possible that people used to assemble there for meetings, right? Because everywhere you see there's an obstruction, everywhere you see there's a pillar, right? There's only little space left. So we don't really know what the hall was used for, right? Was it for religious purposes, or was it for official meetings, or like normal community gatherings? We don't know the usage of the hall, right? But it's called as audience hall, right? So that is audience hall. Now we'll quickly move on to the second impressive feature of the King's Palace, which is called as Mahanavami Dibba, right? The picture is here. This is Mahanavami Dibba. Again, Dibba, as I was telling you, is mound, right? So it is obviously in the shape of a mound, therefore it is called as Mahanavami Dibba, right? And if you look at these pictures clearly, if you have time, just Google them. Yeah, you'll come across all these sculptures on the walls of the Dibba, right? You have all these animals, flowers, stories, all these epic stories, right? They are depicted in the form of sculptures on the walls of Mahanavami Dibba, right? So again, where is it located exactly? It is one of the highest points in the city, right? Like if you climb the whole thing, and if you stay here, like if you stand here, You can almost see the whole of the city at one glance, right? That's how high it's located, right? It's a massive platform raising from a base of about 11,000 square feet. Like the area of this is 11,000 square feet. That is a huge structure, right? And then the height is of 40 feet. Roughly, you can imagine like a 4-story building, right? If you stand here, you'll almost feel like you're on the 4th floor of a building. Yeah? So that's how tall and how wide the Mahanavami Dibba is, right? And there is evidence found by the archaeologists that the Mahanavami Dibba is supported by a wooden structure. Yeah, and the base of the platform is covered with relief carvings. I was telling you, right? Like again, I'm not sure if you can see these bottom part, the place where I'm marking with red color. If you look at them clearly, you will find all these carvings, sculptures of animals and birds on the lower portion of the platform, right? That again is the significance. Okay, any questions till here? Sreshta, you're right. Dibba is nothing but a raised platform. Amita, to answer your question, I think you're talking about the pillars for audience hall, right? We do not have an exact count, right? We don't know the exact number, but one could fairly say that, let's say this is the hall. Yeah, they're very closely spaced. Yeah, so the pillars are very, very closely spaced, and somewhere in the description, one of the foreign travelers mentions that he's very confused, right? Like he's very confused as to why this structure was built, because there's hardly any space for people to go and sit down and have a chat, right? You can't even like go and like a group of 2-3 people also cannot sit down between a pillar and a pillar. That's how congested the space is. Yeah. But with regards to the number of the pillars, we're not really sure, Amita. Yes, Reshta, this is the picture of Mahanavami Dibba. And I'm sorry if these carvings are not visible, but you can just Google them, right? Yeah, just Google saying Mahanavami Dibba, you'll find all these sculptures. No, actually, wait, we have a picture here. Yeah, just look at all these carvings, right? Like there are horses, there is somebody taking care of the horse, there are elephants, again, people riding the horses, right? So this is just like one portion of the wall, but if you keep moving, you will find so many other stories, right? So these are the carvings. Yeah, okay, Sresha says they're also visible in your textbook picture, so just go through that also. Anyways, so Mahanavami Dibba had relief carvings in the bottom portion, right? So what actually happened here, right? Like it's a closed structure, you can't even like enter inside. Like see, this is a whole closed structure, like you can't even enter inside of it. Everything is solid, right? Then why is it built for? Like what is it built for? There has to be some use. Otherwise buildings spending so much on that doesn't make sense, right? So now archaeologists and historians have come to a conclusion that the so-called the 10-day Hindu festival, which usually comes in the September-October, which happened very recently for us 2 days back, right, called as Dashara. Yeah, it's called as Dashara in northern India. In Bengal it's called as Durga Puja, right? And in the southern peninsula part of India, it's called as Navaratri or Mahanavami, right? So now we all know how the Mahanavami word came from, Mahanavami Dibba, right? So these are different names for Dashara festival, right? So rituals associated with the structure probably coincided with the Mahanavami. So usually there are rituals happening at this place, at Mahanavami Dibba, and they are in correspondence to the 9th day of the Dashera festival, which is called as the Navami, right? Like Navami is the 9th day, right? So because they are corresponding, that is how the historians have named this as Mahanavami Dibba. So that's the whole origin story of the name of this place, right? Yeah. So again, the Vijayanagara kings displayed their prestige, power and suzerainty on this occasion. Obviously, right, when there's a special occasion or any event or any religious function happening, obviously kings will display all their power and might, right, their prestige, their sovereignty, so that other rulers will look at them and will be afraid to wage a war. Yeah, so that again, everything ties back to politics at the end of the day, right? So that's how the Vijayanagara kings displayed their power on the 9th day of the festival. Okay, any questions till here, guys? Any questions, just please put them down in the chat box. In case there are none, then we can go ahead. Amita has a comment to make. Beautiful carvings in the Mahanavi Dibba. Absolutely right, Amita. They're very, very beautiful, because honestly, like if you think how all these sculptures have sculpted like all those minute figures onto a stone, like just imagining it is like a wholesome task, right? Just all those little features on the walls, and stone is a very hard material, so carving that out is a very, very difficult job, but nonetheless they have did a great job, right? Which tools are used, Amita? I'm not really sure about this. I mean, it has to be any normal tools which are used to make statues, right? So because statues also are sometimes made from the stone material, like all those hardcore stones. So yeah, I'm assuming whichever tools are used to make statues, they are only used to make the sculptures on the dibba as well. Anyways, yes, carvings are absolutely done by hand, like everything. All handwork. Chalo, we'll go ahead. This is actually a box in your textbook titled as A House of Victory, right? We have come across this person called Domingo Pace, who has visited the Vijayanagara Empire in 15th century. We've talked about him in last class, right? So this particular person by name Domingo Pace, he writes in one of the books and he uses a term called House of Victory, right? The House of Victory, it's his, he coined this own term, right? And what does he mean by that? He's clubbing the audience hall and Mahanavami Dibba, right? He's clubbing these two impressive structures, and together he is using a single word for them called as House of Victory, right? And then he goes on to describe what Mahanavami Dibba looked like. Again, literally the same information which we've discussed till now, but let's just go through it. Like, these buildings have two platforms, one above the other, beautifully sculpted. On the upper platform in the House of Victory, the king has a room made of cloth, and ideals are usually placed, shrines are there, right? And then there's a dais for all these events to be performed near Mahanavami Dibba, right? So all these like various features he's been describing about the House of Victory in one of his works, right? Cool. So that's Mahanavami Dibba. So here the ceremony is performed on the occasion, like we're going back to the Dashera festival right now, right? Dashera, especially the 9th day of the festival, which is called as Mahanavami or Mahanavami, right? So whatever ceremonies that were performed on the day near this dibba are very, very grand, right? All the public used to come and watch it. King used to be there, officials used to be there, like performers used to perform on the dais, right? So what are these kinds of rituals? What are the kinds of ceremonies that were performed? Number one, it can be in the form of worship of the image, the same thing which we do for any Durga Puja in right now in the 21st century, right? And then there's worship of the state horse, and also sacrifices of certain animals like buffaloes, right? These are some of the occasions or like the events that mark the Navaratri festival, right? And other amusing activities also used to take place, like dances, wrestling matches, right? Processions of caparisoned horses. Again, what is caparisoned? Caparisoned is nothing but decorative, right? So in the pictures or in the movies, or if anybody of y'all have watched the Jodha Akbar film, Hrithik Roshan's and Aishwarya Rai's film, right? There you have this one song where all these elephants, horses, they're heavily decorated with all the cloths, jewels, and all that stuff, right? So that is the exact image which should come to your mind if you listen, if you hear the word caparisoned horses. Yeah. So all of these decorated horses used to like used to roam in the entire city, right? They are taken on processions, yeah. And then elephants and chariots and soldiers, all of them were present. They used to do some kind of presentations, also like some kind of rituals, yeah, some kind of yagnas and all. They were presented before the king, because king obviously used to be there sitting on some kind of platform near the Mahanavami Dibba, right? And also he had some guests, right? And all the chief nayakas and subordinate kings, all of them used to be there, and in front of them these amusing activities used to happen, right? These are some of the events that happen on Mahanavami. And obviously they do have a very deep symbolic meaning, right? Symbolic meaning again can be in two forms. Number one, it can be in the religious forms, because the king truly cares about religion, or like he's truly deeply religious. That is why he's worshipping God with so many activities. That's number one. That's the number one symbolic meaning. Number two, it can also be, as I was telling you, because of political meaning, right? Because once you do all these grand activities, it's a kind of prestige, right? The other kings of the neighboring kingdoms will look at whatever is happening near Mahanavami Dibba, and they'll obviously be, they'll think, right, like, wow, like Vijayanagara has a lot of wealth. Yeah, these are all like symbolic meanings which play a very crucial role in the political aspect of the kingdom, right? So that's why these ceremonies are very, very important. So again, on the last day of the festival, which is the 10th day, the actual festival, king inspected his armies and the armies of the nayakas as well, right, in an open field, and that in itself is a grand ceremony. Like inspection is also a ceremony, yeah. So that's how joyful or merryful the occasion was, and at the end of it, it was something productive as well. Cool. So anyways, again, because of the festival or because of annual rituals and all, it is kind of mandatory, I would say it is compulsory, that all of these nayakas and amara nayakas we've discussed about in the previous classes, they used to bring all these rich gifts and tributes for the king, right? What does this signify again? There's always hidden meaning behind gifting, yeah, this is for sure. So whenever a person is gifting something to somebody, there's always a hidden meaning. So in this case, the fact that nayakas are gifting to the king, they are trying to show their allegiance or loyalty to the king, right? So that's the hidden meaning here. And again, was the Mahanavami Dibba that stands today the center of this elaborate ritual? This is a question we need to ask ourselves. Was it on the Dibba that all these rituals were performed, or was it around the Dibba, or was it away from the Dibba? Right? So questions and answers are supposed to be speculated, right? Because we do not have a definite answer for it. And also scholars have pointed out that the space surrounding the structure does not seem to have been adequate for elaborate processions, right? Because again, some structures might be there, the place might not be sufficient because of certain factors, right? Because the ground is smaller and the members are larger, like high in number. Whatever the situation is, scholars after examining these places have suggested that this place might not be useful for all these long processions, right? Where all the armies are present, they are like marching forward, all these like elaborate processions. Sometimes that is not possible because of the place, right? That is what some scholars claim, and that is exactly why we are supposed to wonder whether Mahanavami Dibba is the exact place where the elaborate rituals used to happen. Again, what do I mean by elaborate rituals here? Elaborate rituals in the sense they are all these huge processions which usually require a lot of space, right? But when it comes to like worshipping the image or stuff like that, they are not elaborate, because one or two priests are enough to carry out the worshipping, to do the worshipping, right? These are definitely done near Mahanavami Dibba, but these elaborate processions where thousands and thousands of men are included as a part of processions, that might not be possible. Yeah, so that is where the speculation comes in, and just like other structures in the royal center, it remains an enigma. Enigma is like a puzzle or a miracle, right? Something about which we do not have the complete information. Yeah, so that is about the Mahanavami Dibba. Tanishq, I'm helpless, Tanishq. I genuinely don't know how to speak Hindi. If I know, I would have obviously explained in Hindi, right? But I'm helpless here. I can't do anything, Tanishq. Anyways, so we've discussed about two prominent structures, which are Audience Hall and Mahanavami Dibba, which are located within the Royal Centre, right? Now let's move on to look at other buildings in the Royal Centre, right? Obviously there are n number of structures. We're only focusing on things which kind of seem very important or grand, right? So we'll quickly move on to the next like other buildings, right? But these are located within the Royal Centre, which is towards the southwestern part of the Vijayanagara city. Yeah. So another important building, or another in fact beautiful building in the Royal Centre, is the Lotus Mahal, right? Lotus Mahal. So it was named by British travellers in the 19th century. Again, we don't really know what that was called in the 15th century, but historians have given this name, especially the British travelling historians. They have called this as Lotus Mahal, right? So again, the name in itself might certainly sound like kind of romantic or elegant, but we don't really know what it was used for, right? Was it a temple? Was it a community hall? Was it a amusement place? It can be anything. Yeah, but we do not know the use of it. And according to one suggestion which was found in a map drawn by Mackenzie, yeah, Mackenzie, we've already discussed him in great detail. Go back to a couple of classes, you will remember who Mackenzie is, right? So in one of the maps that he drew, he kind of suggests that this so-called Lotus Mahal might have been a council chamber, right? What is a council chamber? To put it in very simple words, it's the place where the king used to meet his advisors or courtiers, right? Like an official hall where the policies were formulated or like laws were designed and all, right? So again, it's not a confirmation, we do not know it for sure, but it's just one suggestion made by Colin Mackenzie, right? Cool. Anjali joined us. Good morning, Anjali. Yes, Reshta, you're right. It's Colin Mackenzie, right? We've discussed about him in very great detail in a couple of classes back. So if you all do not remember, just go back and look at that. Amita, map maker. I've also mentioned this point that Mackenzie was a cartographer, right? Cartographer is a person who designs or draws maps, right? The art of designing maps is called as cartography. Yeah. So yeah, Colin Mackenzie was a map maker basically, Amita. Cartographer, right? Anjali, yes, that's a very great analogy, Anjali. Anjali says it's basically like a parliament. That's exactly right, Anjali. Absolutely true. Like in parliament also nowadays we sit and make laws, right? In the same manner, in the council chamber as well, king and his advisors used to sit down and make laws for the kingdom. Yeah, that's a good analogy. Cool. We'll move ahead then. Where were we? Yeah, so map maker, it was Mackenzie, and he suggests that it was a council chamber. While most temples were located in the sacred center, right? Obviously, because as the name suggests, it is a religious center, right? But the same point we've mentioned that there are a number of temples in the royal center as well. The figure which we roughly came around was 60, right? So temples here and there. So out of those temples, out of those 60 temples which are a part of the royal center, one of them which is very very spectacular and also important is called as Hazara Rama temple, right? The spelling is here, it's Hazara Rama, right? So it's called as Hazara Rama temple, and the unique speciality of this temple is that it was probably meant only for the king and his family's use. None of the outsiders, not even the courtiers, not even the military commanders, and leave alone the ordinary people, right? They were not allowed into the Hazara Rama temple. It was a temple purely constructed for the worship by the king and his family members, right? So that's the speciality of Hazara Rama, and it was a spectacular temple. Like, just because only one family is going doesn't mean the temple is small. It's very huge. Yeah. So, however, like if you go and visit that right now, the central shrine images are missing. Like the statues of the god are missing. Yeah. Somebody must have stolen it, or when Vijayanagara city was completely sacked in 1565 in the Battle of Talikota, then Muslim rulers have destroyed all these temples, right? So at that time, these images in the shrines were taken away, they were destroyed, right? But nonetheless, the walls survived, the walls of the temple survived, and on those walls you actually have all these beautiful sculpted panels, right? Just like how the carvings are there on the Mahanavami Dibba, in the same manner you will also find carvings on the Hazara Rama temple, right? And these included scenes from the Ramayana, right? Whatever the scenes are there from Ramayana, they are inscribed on the walls, they are sculpted on the walls of the Hazara Rama temple in the form of stories, right? So Ramayana was a crucial part, and while many of the structures at Vijayanagara were destroyed when the city was sacked, the point I was making, right? 1565, Battle of Talikota, Vijayanagara was completely destroyed by Deccani Sultanates. Yeah, but traditions of building palatial structures were continued by the Nayakas. 1565 Vijayanagara was gone, but after them all these small Nayakas still ruled the part of the Vijayanagara empire, right? They continued building all these massive humongous structures. Palatial is like big, right? So all these palatial structures were still being built by the Nayakas, right? And most of those temples still survive. Yeah, if any of you all have visited Hampi, which is in present day Ballari district of Karnataka, you must have seen all these huge structures, right? They were built in the 15th, 16th centuries and they are still surviving even now in the 21st century, right? Karnataka. Yes, Amita. Oh, Yash is here. Hello, Yash. Vijayanagara, initially when it started out, it started in Karnataka, but later on it spread to other states as well, right? It spread to Tamil Nadu, it spread to Kerala, it expanded to Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, even present day Goa, a little bit of Maharashtra and a little bit of Orissa as well. That is how huge the territory was. But when it started out, it started in Karnataka. Yes, Amita? Cool. So that is the where we were discussing about the Royal Center, right? So that's Royal Center. We've discussed a couple of buildings like Lotus Mahal. We've also talked about the Mahanavami Dibba. We've talked about Audience Hall. And finally, we also talked about the Hazara Rama Temple. So these are four special features of the Royal Center. From there, we'll quickly move on to the Sacred Center now, right? Sacred Center, as the name suggests, is the place where so many temples were located, right? We'll be looking at some of them in the next couple of slides. So the first sub-theme under the Sacred Center is choosing a capital, right? So till now we were discussing about the southwestern part of the Vijayanagara city. Now we'll quickly move on to the rocky northern end of the city, which is on the banks of Tungabhadra, right? Again, I highly urge you all to go back to your textbook, have a look at the maps, right? You locate where Tungabhadra river is, and that is the northern end of the Vijayanagara city, right? It's basically all the plateau region, right? The peninsula plateau is there. That is why it's very rocky, like rocky surfaces, like hills and all, right? And according to the local traditions, like as the local oral sayings goes, these hills sheltered the monkey kingdom of Vali and Sugriva mentioned in the Ramayana. If you all know the stories of Ramayana, you might have come across kingdom names like Monkey Kingdom of Vali and Sugriva, right? These are all Ramayana stories, right? So the local people believe that this was the actual place where the monkey kingdom was located, right? These hills, the rocky northern structure, it kind of gave shelter to the monkey kingdom. That's what the local people claim. Other traditions within the city, they suggest that Pampa Devi, the local mother goddess, we've come across this name Pampa Devi in the first class because we've seen how the term Hampi is given after this deity called as Pampa Devi, right? So Pampa Devi is the local mother goddess, right? She kind of admired Virupaksha, right? Virupaksha again is another male god, yeah. And to put it very simply, he is also recognized as a form of Shiva, right? Just like how Vishnu has all these 10 avatars, Shiva also has a couple of avatars, right? Out of them, Virupaksha is one. Yeah, Virupaksha is highly worshipped in present day Karnataka, and this local mother goddess by name Pampa Devi, she did penance and meditations for so many years together, just because she wanted to marry Virupaksha, right? She was madly in love with Virupaksha, therefore wanted to marry him, and that is why she meditated there, right? And to this day, like even in the 21st century, if you visit Virupaksha temple, I think in November or December, this ceremony usually happens every year, that their marriage, like their union, right, like the union of Virupaksha and Pampa Devi, they are very grandly celebrated every year in Virupaksha temple right now also, yeah, in the 21st century also. That is how the local importance of Pampa Devi and Virupaksha is. Okay, any questions till here? Yes, absolutely correct, Yash. There are so many beautiful structures, and good that you listed out a couple of them. Yeah. What is the use of Krishna River? Yash, again, there's no use per se, but I was talking about the Raichur Doab, right? If you go back to the last class, we talked about how Vijayanagara city always fought, or like Vijayanagara Empire always fought for the Raichur Doab, which the Deccani Sultanates and Gajapatis of Orissa, right? And why is that? Because Raichur Doab in itself is a very fertile place, and again, Doab is basically the land between two rivers, right? What are those two rivers here? Tungabhadra and Krishna. So between those two rivers, this Raichur Doab was there, and because there's a lot of water available, agriculture would be easier, right? Irrigation facilities would be more. That is why agricultural productivity will be more, which in turn gets revenue to the state. So that is the strategical importance of the Krishna river and the Raichur Doab. Yeah, I'm hoping that is clear, Yash. Not, I don't think that is right, Yash, regarding Virupaksha being a temple of Vishnu. Virupaksha is definitely a form of Shiva, so it has to be a Shiva temple at any cost, right? But just check that out. As far as I remember, it's Shiva temple, Yash. Cool. So their marriage is annually celebrated in Virupaksha temple. That's the last point we've dealt. Okay, so among these rocky northern structures within these hills itself, we also find a number of Jain temples, right? Because if you remember correctly, again going back I think to the 4th chapter where we talked about Buddhism and Jainism in detail, we have seen Jainism people splitting into two, right? Shvetambaras and Digambaras, if you remember correctly. So Shvetambaras, we've seen that during some crisis or floods, famine actually, they came to the south and settled in Karnataka. If you remember the whole episode, then that is how there's a lot of Jain populations and Jain temples in Karnataka, because Shvetambaras have settled down in Karnataka, right? So that is why before the Vijayanagara people came in the 9th, 10th, 11th centuries, Jain people used to stay there, and a lot of Jain temples were therefore constructed in the rocky northern terrain, right? And in other words, this area was associated with several sacred traditions, right? Shiva temples are there, Vishnu temples are there, Puranic temples were there, sometimes mosques were also found. Now Jain temples are there, right? It's a place or abode or home to several sacred traditions and their institutions, right? Again, temple building as such, like fundings done by the kings, donation by the kings, construction of new temples, remodeling the old ones. So all of this is not something new. It is not innovated by the Vijayanagara rulers. It has been there forever, right? It has had a long history, because we have seen examples of dynasties like Pallava kings, Chalukya kings, Hoysalas, and also Cholas, who dedicated themselves to building so many temples, yeah, who donated a lot, right? So that's not something new. And rulers very often encouraged temple building as a means of associating themselves with the divine, right? So again, we have seen one thing is they want to build temples to prove their legitimacy of their authority, right? That's number one. And number two, how do they prove the legitimacy? By associating themselves with the god. In some cases, you will also see that the kings are claiming to be gods. Yeah, something like sons of gods, or they themselves are gods. Some divine association, some divine connection, right? Rulers themselves claimed that we are sons of God, or we are gods. That is why we have a lot of power and nobody can come against us, right? So that is how rulers claimed themselves, and in order to prove that, they need to build so many temples. That is exactly what they did. On the other side, temples were, in some sense, they were religious centers. People used to come and worship. But on the other side, they were also centers of learning. Yeah, all these Brahmanical learning like Vedas, Upanishads, all of them were taught to people in the temple premises itself. Like ordinary people used to go and learn these from Brahmins, right? So it was a center of learning. And besides that, rulers and others often granted land and other resources for the maintenance of temples. Not just rulers, but also wealthy people, like elite people who had enough money. They would often grant land or other kinds of resources for the maintenance of these temples, right? So that's a fair description of the religious center. Comments, questions? Yes, Reshta, you're right. Doab is land between two rivers. Absolutely correct. You're right, Yash. I mean, there were no elections back then, so for getting a vote would be a wrong thing. But to maintain their power. Yeah, the second part of your statement is right. To maintain their power and authority, they often constructed temples. Right? Okay, cool. Namit is here with us. Hi, Namit. I'm good. Thanks for asking, and I'm hoping you're well too. Anyways, we'll move ahead. Yeah. So consequently, what happened is temples developed as significant religious, social, cultural, and economic centers. Till now, we've only seen the religious aspect. Slowly, like very little, we've touched upon the learning aspect because Vedas and all were taught. But eventually, what happened is people started, like gathering in the temples and, like normally having conversations with each other about the basic social life, about how society should work. Like sometimes they've also discussed about the markets, the currency, right? So because they're discussing all of these aspects, they've eventually turned into social, cultural, economic, and also significant religious centers, right? So temples have become like an all in all, like all in one. Yeah. So that happened. This didn't happen overnight, but gradually over a couple of years. Again, from the point of view of rulers, according to them, like what their thought process is that by constructing or by repairing or even by maintaining temples, yeah, the same point again. Why did they do that? To win the support and recognition for their power, wealth, and piety. Yeah, because they wanted to win over the people. See, they might go against their subjects, but at the end of the day, any ruler would wish that their subjects or the kingdom people will wholeheartedly accept them as the ruler. Anybody will have that, right? Like within a human being, we want other people to accept us. We want other people to acknowledge that we have that power. That is exactly what kings also wished for. and in order to win over the people, they constructed all these temples. Yeah. So it is likely that the very choice of the site of Vijayanagara was inspired by the existence of shrines of Virupaksha and Pampa Devi. Right? Again, now we are going back to the importance of Virupaksha and Pampa Devi. They are very, very important. Like, they have so much significance attached to them, right? So these are often built, like these temples or deities were there before the Vijayanagaras came up, right? So the mere factor why Vijayanagara rulers chose that particular territory as their capital is because they wanted to attach themselves to Virupaksha and Pampa Devi. Again, legitimacy of power, right? So that's a strategical location. Tactic, like great tactics. Tactics are often needed for any kingdom to survive. Yeah, the same thing, right? Like Vijayanagara kings claim to rule on behalf of God Virupaksha. They often said that, like God Virupaksha, we are the messengers of God Virupaksha, like he sent us to rule y'all. That's what they claimed. All the Vijayanagara kings, right? All the 4 dynasties. And also, like whenever they're issuing any orders, like usually all these farmans and all were issued, right? So whenever they're issuing any royal orders, they've always signed it off with the name Shri Virupaksha. Yeah. Usually if you look at any other kings, let's say, I don't know, like some Cholas or whatever, he would write whatever he want to write, and in the end he would sign by writing his own name, like Rajaraja Chola or Rajendra Chola, any king name, right? But when it comes to Vijayanagara kings, they often signed off their royal orders by the name Shri Virupaksha, yeah, trying to show their association with Virupaksha rather than their own name. And these are usually written in the Kannada script. Yes, that's about the Kannada script. And quickly moving on, we just have, I think, one more slide to go. Rulers also indicated their close links with God by using the title Hindu Suratrana, right? They often claim this title Hindu Suratrana, and in some way it is associated to the gods again, right? This again, the whole slide is basically about the relationship between the king and the god, right? Again, what is a Suratrana? It is the Sanskritization of the Arabic term Sultan. Sultan is usually the title given to any Muslim ruler, right? So sometimes the Arabic or Persian terms were Sanskritized when they came to India, right? In the same manner, Sultan was Sanskritized and it became Suratrana. Yeah. So now what does this basically mean? Hindu Suratrana basically means Hindu Sultan. Basically saying he's a Hindu king, right? Hindu, the word Hindu again is associated with the Lord Virupaksha here. So that's how they claim their association with God. And even as they drew on earlier traditions, the rulers of Vijayanagara innovated and developed these. On one side, they are drawing upon all these Islamic traditions. That they're using terms like Sultan, Suratrana, which are from Islamic traditions, right? That doesn't mean they're solely depending on that. They're also innovating and developing certain other new features which they are branding as their own, right? So that is what they're doing. And finally, royal portrait sculpture was now displayed in temples. So again, initially, like before Vijayanagaras, putting up kings like full size or like life size statues in the temples is not acceptable. That is definitely not done, right? But once Vijayanagaras came in, they made it okay, they made it acceptable that their own statues can be erected in the temple premises. They can be displayed in the temples alongside the statues of the gods, right? That became important again. And the mere fact that king is visiting a temple to worship God, that in itself is a big occasion, that is celebrated, right? And often, like, he never used to go alone, right? all these important nayakas of the empire, like Amara nayakas, military commanders, everybody, they used to accompany the king while he's going to the temple. So that in itself is a big celebratory event. Yeah, so that's what we have for today's class. Any questions, guys? Please put them down in the chat box. Yeah, so that's basically, we discussed majority of the royal center and like some parts of the what do you call this, religious institutions, right? Religious center, sacred center, right? We'll also be discussing the remaining portion of the sacred center in the next class, but for now, since time's up, we'll just hang on to this, right? So in case of any questions, please ask them in the chat box. I'll answer them, but in the meanwhile, I'll try to wind this chapter up, right? Wind this session up, sorry. Cool. So regarding the plus and iconic subscriptions I was mentioning in the beginning of this session, there's an offer going on right now because of Dashra, obviously, and it's valid till 18th of October, which is tomorrow, right? So it's a limited time offer. Go grab yours before this ends. So how does it work, right? So if you use the code TUM10, you'll obviously get a 10% off straight away. But if you do it before tomorrow, you will get an additional 10% off, right? So that's the offer. Anyways, if you like the content of these videos, please do like it once the live stream ends. Like the video, share it as much as possible, and also subscribe to the channel Unacademy and scholars in particular, right? Thank you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in on a Sunday morning. I get it, it's hectic, but dedicating 1 hour is not too much, I guess. Anyways, that brings us to the end of the session. So I'll see you guys again tomorrow, right? Like tomorrow is Monday. Yeah. So I'll see you guys tomorrow again at 6 p.m. and we'll be continuing this chapter, right? I will most probably try to finish it, but if not, then I have to drag it on to Wednesday as well, right? And depending on that, we can either have a quiz on Wednesday or Friday. Yeah. So that's like the brief week plan we have for the next week, the coming week. Yeah. Cool. So any questions, just hang out and ask. I'll just be here for a couple of seconds in case anybody has questions. But other than that, you'll are free to leave. You all can leave the session. The session is over. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 6 p.m. Yeah. Bye guys. Bye bye. Okay, I don't see any questions, therefore I'm winding this session up. Thanks so much again for tuning in on a Sunday morning. I'll see you guys tomorrow, right, at 6 in the evening. Till then, have a good weekend, yeah, and also have a good day tomorrow. Bye everyone, take care.